It's becoming a fact of life that we live in a fire environment. Fire has been a piece of the environment, not just in Kittitas County, but the entire east slopes of the Cascades for hundreds of years. And what has changed is that people have out-migrated from the cities. They want to go out into the forest and the rangelands for a sense of place and the opportunity for peace and quiet. Well, with that comes the risk that at some point we have very dry conditions, we have very volatile conditions, and we live in a very windy place. And if you take the newest fire, it was affected by wind dramatically. Taylor Bridge was dramatically affected by wind. And once a fire gets, a wildland fire gets its head up and takes off, it's going to burn until the weather changes. And you can't have enough resources to do anything but try and protect people and lives until that changes. So it's not, I would call it sobering, but it's always been here. We still have hundreds of thousands of acres in Kittitas County at risk for another wildfire, whether it be lightning or a vehicle accident or a down power line. Those light, flashy fuels, the grass and the brush driven in the wind on that right day will continue to cause major fires in our valley. And we have to learn that lesson. I've always said that fire gives us the test and then it gives us the lesson. And what I would offer from Taylor Bridge to Colocum Tarps is that Kittitas County does an excellent job of preparing itself, discussing after the incident what can it do better, and sitting in the county commissioner's seat as Colocum Tarps came into our county. The EOC was activated, the Emergency Operations Center was activated very timely. We were asked to make the emergency declaration timely. The evacuations were well thought out and well administered. The roads were closed. The animal shelter was very orderly, initiated, Red Cross shelter. I thought they just did everything as professionally as they could. And so while it's a traumatic event to have a wildfire in your backyard, they did a great job. District 2 engaged the fire when it came down towards the cabins. The wind farm was notified. Gosh, you can only just do so much. Right. And I think that from Taylor Bridge that day, that was, and I was not here, but there was some chaotic times trying to evacuate people and save lives on that day that we just did not have this time, because if you do it, unfortunately, if you practice it, you get pretty good at it. So that's what I would say. And fire is in our future, and it will always be here. I've always said that the fuels tend to dry out around the 1st of July, and we have about 100 days of very much at risk in our valley, and we will always have that. We have a huge forest health problem. The forests are being eaten, and those forests are very volatile, and that's what we saw on Table Mountain.
And bugs.
Yeah, and so with the insects, disease, the collapse of the forest, that we're also at risk in the forest for major fires that will originate up there and come down into the valley in the wind. It is what we have, and it's all over the West.
Not just here, obviously.
Yeah, we continue to learn. But people move and will continue to out into the wildlands because they get a sense of place. And everyone enjoys having some property, but with that comes the responsibility to continually think that in July they'll be at risk, and plan for that. And I think that's the next phase for us. What we have done is, in many years ago, fires actually burned unchecked, and this would be, around the turn of the century. So when the fire started, there was no people to be in its way, and some days it burned hot, some days it just creeped around, and it created a mosaic of various fuels that just did not allow for large fires. Early in my career, we didn't experience fires like this because the fuel beds were still growing up and collapsing, and they really hadn't
The
built
natural
up.
cycle?
Yeah, the natural cycle in the Kittitas Valley is probably every 20 to 50 years. Over the history, there's been major fires, then the fuels clean up, and it's one of the ways the forest regenerates. And so the fire regime, as we called it, is still there. And so we've moved ourselves out into that, and if we don't do something to manage those fuel loadings, then we will continue to go through this again and again. And that's part of the lesson that we need to learn when we choose to go out and live in the wilderness.